Here's this week's Blending the Family Parenting Tip Tuesday from your host, Tommy Maloney. What's it this week? What's the little tip you're going to give us, Tommy?
Hi, welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thanks for tuning in. And yes, this is Parenting Tip Tuesday, but this is going to be a little different. Actually, I have a guest on Parenting Tip Tuesday. Actually, a past guest has come onto the program. She wanted to come back. Crazy. Gabrielle Hartley is on this episode of the podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world right now. As a matter of fact, she has created a new class to help with a bit of the world of divorce. If you're going through divorce and unfortunately you might be in the same household right now, Gabrielle is going to help us with that. If you do not remember Gabrielle, she is the author of the book, let me bring it up, Better Apart. And like I said, she's created a brand new course to help you out. Not me, I'm married, happily married. And I'm listening to my chair squeak and I'm thinking I should have gotten a new chair for Christmas. My wife, Ann, was going to get me, and I told her no, and I said, maybe I should. I think it's definitely time. Anywho, I digress. On this episode with Parenting Tip Tuesday with Gabrielle Hartley, we're going to talk about unique ways of, if you are still in the same household, which you'll hear we talk about on this episode, that I was still under the same roof with my former spouse while we were going through the process of divorce and separation. The issue was I needed a place to, I had to find a place to live. And so in that meantime, we were under the same household. And so Gabrielle had a great tip of in that situation. You know what else is really interesting? Creating a vision board. I didn't think we'd be talking about vision boards, talking about divorce, but we did. Have you ever heard of oak tags? I've never heard of oak tags, and apparently those were a thing back in the day. And so I know I'm somewhat old, but I'd never heard of it. We're going to talk about that in a weird way. And also changing vernacular. And I cringed. I'm going to say it. I cringed when Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin were talking about the uncoupling. And it's like, what? You guys are getting divorced. What do you mean uncoupling? But I have to admit, the more Gabrielle and I talked about it on this episode, I was starting to think, oh, that makes sense. Because I don't use the word step. We don't use the word step kids or step parents in our household. We always use bonus. And so it took me a while to really have, like in those Minion movies, light bulb. And that's what happened. I had a light bulb moment with Gabrielle. Something else I want to just mention that we talked about, but also in life right now, and that is just simply slowing down. It's a different time. It's our world is a little goofy right now. This is a good opportunity to just take a step back, slow down, and really think about priorities. Currently, I don't like talking about it on this podcast. I have another podcast that I talk about. Gosh, I've been up since 5:30 recording podcasts. So sorry. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I have what I call the dreaded day job, and I'm thinking more and more that a lot of us who still are blessed to get to go to a job, and even though for me I don't go to a physical office, I travel 100% for work, but right now I will be working virtually from home. And as much as I hate that job, I have to remind myself that I'm blessed to still have it. But this is where taking a step back and slowing down and just going, it doesn't define me, that job. And your job shouldn't define you either, especially if it's a situation where you really, 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 really hate it. So, my advice that I'm going to say to myself and my advice for you is we should look for different opportunities. And I know that unemployment is going to be hitting the ceiling, but there are other ways. And right now, I've had this discussion with my bonus daughter Becca and my son Connor about looking for work, different ideas. One of the things I threw out there was, try and become, on TikTok or even Instagram or Snapchat, put more content out there and try and be an influencer. I hate to say it, but it's a way to create income. I said to my son, who has my old 35 millimeter camera, and if you don't know what that means, this is back in the day when you had to go to the store and buy film and put film into the camera and then take pictures. When you were done with taking pictures, when the film ran out, you had to then go back to the store and get those pictures developed. Anyway, my point with Connor was, let's start taking pictures. People will buy your stock photos. And I don't know if he'll listen to Dad, but I just think it would be just looking for ways for our teenagers to get income. And I would love to hear any suggestions. Please, Tommy at blendingthefamily.com. Tommy at blendingthefamily.com. If you have suggestions on how we can help teenagers make money legally, I just want to emphasize that, legally, that would be great. Okay? I know I've gone on a tangent or off the tracks or whatever I do. Gabrielle Hartley was kind enough to come on this special episode of Parenting Tip Tuesday. Find her in the show notes. And you know what? Let me just pull up her Instagram account right now, because I'm sure it is. Yeah, it's just GabrielleHartley.com. Gabrielle, GabrielleHartley, GabrielleHartley.com. Check her out. She's a trip. As you will listen for first few minutes, I don't get a word in edgewise, which is fine with me because I don't say a lot of things that are too intelligent. Thanks for joining me on this Parenting Tip Tuesday. As our good friend Terry Crews will always say about this podcast, is your success is my success. Stop hugging each other. Don't handshake. Wash your hands. Be there for each other. Check on single people. When I say check on, call them, text them, email them, find out how they're doing. In this episode, you'll hear I called my grandmother, talked to my grandmother. I am going to make a point of contacting my grandmother as much as possible during the week. So there you go. Be kind to another. I love you. Thanks for taking the time to download this episode. Please leave a rating and review. I really, really want to do this full time. I want this to be my full-time job. Please help me. Leave ratings, reviews, share this podcast. There you go. Great. Now I gotta go wash my hands.
Warning. You're about to listen to a conversation, not an interview.
So how are you guys holding up?
Extremely well. Today is the first day both my son and bonus daughter will be going to the world of online learning.
Oh, God bless, because we are not quite there. It's a bit of a nightmare. How old are your kids?
Becca is a senior and Connor is a junior.
Okay. So we just got a letter. I have a freshman, I have a 7th grader, and I have a 2nd grader. And, we're still getting letters saying, stay calm. On Thursday, we'll give you more information. I mean, it's like, OMG, I have so much work to do. And I have kids who I'm trying to say, please do all the optional assignments that your school has given you.
Or make them just start cleaning the house.
Yeah. That's what's happening. Well, we give them the, you can read a book, you can listen to a book on tape, or you can pile wood in the backyard. It depends on the kid, right? Some would rather one and others the other. So I'm really excited to tape this show. This is a really big issue for people. Just by way of information, I have decided to launch just a little class. It's $149 for the end user to sort of, it is the better part method, but I'm going to do a very condensed version of the method and then have like Q&A with me also. And I put it up for tomorrow at 11:30. This probably won't be out by then, but if people are interested, I can do it weekly for an hour, and I'm making it cheap enough that even if I just get 1 or 2 people, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Just as a start.
No. As the emails were going back, or I don't know what were we using, Instagram or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will have this. I will get this produced tonight, and it should be up first thing in the morning for you.
Awesome. I think did I put this on for tomorrow? Let me look.
Gabrielle, the floor is yours, really. I'm just here as the vessel to help you get your message out.
Okay. Well, okay. So I don't know if I have 40. Well, I guess I could talk for a long time.
Well, and yeah, that was one of the topics Marco and I talked about after we recorded. That yes, we are very blessed to have people like you that are really good guests, because you will talk, and it's
a benefit.
It is a benefit, because I think I mentioned to you the first time we were on that I did have a previous lawyer on, and it was like pulling teeth to get answers. I feel like I was the judge and jury going, I need some more of a response than that. So yeah, I'm always grateful when you come on, Gabrielle, because I know that you have a lot to offer and a lot to say. So both are a bonus for us podcasters.
Well, thank you so much. So do you want me to just start? Do you want to do an intro? Tell me what you would like.
I always record the intros afterward.
Okay. So, you want me to just launch into why
Just go. Yeah, just go for it. Just go.
Okay. So, good morning. I am Gabrielle Hartley. I am a divorce attorney, mediator, coach, speaker, author. I wear a mother and wife and wear many, many hats. I'm an adult, obviously, who grew up with divorced parents in a blended family situation, which persists. We didn't used to share all of our holidays and goings on together because, as many of your audience probably know, when you're going through a divorce or breakup, or even for years after, it can be very difficult. And sometimes it never happens, but for many people, it can be possible to actually make your relationship better, if not, better than it was, or better than you ever imagined it could be after the divorce. So by way of background, my parents had a shared parenting plan long before that was a thing. They got divorced in the early 80s, and my brother and I changed houses every single day, and it was viewed as very strange to say the least at the time. We lived in New York City, and most people only saw their parents they lived with their moms, they saw their dads maybe every other weekend, and if they were lucky, a Wednesday dinner visit. And my parents were sort of almost like braggy about how well they got along with each other, and I did not really think it was that awesome. There was fighting and there was unhappiness and all this stuff that comes with divorce and blending families. But when I grew up and I became a lawyer, and then I worked for a judge in New York City, where I helped to resolve hundreds and hundreds of crazy pre-trial cases, I realized my parents were onto something. And what I realized is while not everybody can get along, there's a large majority of cases where people can get along better than they think they can. And B, there needs to be a method, a process through which even those of us who are married to impossible people, we can feel better. We can make our kids' lives better. We can start integrating more deeply in ourselves, not get sort of swept into the fuss and the mess that is the divorce process as it presently stands, and we can make our own lives better. And so that's when I came up with what is called the Better Apart method. And I wrote a book which came out last February, January 29th, technically, of 2019. HarperCollins put it out. It's called Better Apart, the radically positive way to separate. So radically positive, what does that mean? It means elegant. It means internal and external alignment. It means not feeling like garbage while you're getting divorced, not feeling like you're always the bad guy, not feeling like you're being greedy if you want support or you're being taken advantage of if you have to give support. It's a process. It's a 5-step process to feeling better as you move through and beyond the divorce process. So when I wrote the book, I had this idea that I was going to really be like the global conversation changer around divorce. Not that I was going to do it on my own, but that I was going to sort of help to ignite the conversation and elevate everyone else who wants to really feel good and change the legacy, both for their own families, for their clients' families, and most importantly, for all of our children, right? Because when you grow up with divorced parents, for most of us, and I say us because I grew up with divorced parents, it really impacts us, whether we think it does or not. I always said my parents' divorce didn't impact me at all. But of course, I am now a divorce lawyer and speaker and educator. And obviously, it had much deeper influence on who I am and what the navigation of my life forward was. Okay.
So Gabrielle, let me pause you right there. So you say, because I know my parents' divorce affected me. I spent years in therapy. I battled years of depression. So how did it personally affect you?
So I think that it encouraged me to always see both sides, right? I think that it made me more sensitive to the needs of the children, and it made me have maybe more empathy for both of my parents. It probably made me, I always say kids who have divorced parents are a little bit more competent. Like nobody was organizing everything in my life for me. I was doing a lot of stuff for myself because my parents were doing things to get their lives back on track for a number of years, which is totally normal. That's what happens to people. Your life is sort of upended and you just hope the kids turn out all right. And if you can minimize conflict, that's the best thing you can possibly do. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends. It means tap into the neutral and start going from there. I'm starting to do an online class for individuals to help them learn about the process and ask some questions. And right now I'm focusing it on COVID-19 because there are so many hot button topics coming up right now for people, whether they're 8 years into the divorce or just starting to navigate them right now. And I just thought maybe we should spend a few minutes on those right now, if you think that would be interesting.
Well, I still want to go back and want to hear more about how did divorce really impact you. I'm guessing because of it, that was probably why you took the path of being a lawyer, being somebody who's taking on divorce cases. Um, is that a possibility why you got into law?
So it's interesting. So law, I wanted to get into law mostly because I wanted to feel like I had a sense of internal power that I didn't have to have fear of the unknown, that I would be able to understand things in a way it felt like mostly men understood, right? As a woman. I did not have the intention of going into family law. In fact, when I was in law school, I took family law pass fail. And that was you're only allowed to take one pass fail course. And that was the one I chose because I was so sick of the whole idea of divorce and all the conversations. I mean, we could have a whole episode on, do's and don'ts, right?
Right.
From my perspective. But what happened was basically I got this job for Judge Sunshine, and he is the chief administrative judge in New York City, hearing all divorce cases, actually for the whole state. And I was charged with trying to resolve trial ready cases, meaning people who they each had a lawyer. They were, they'd been to court multiple times. They were about to go really to battle. And so they would come in with their lawyers into the back conference room. And I had to resolve as many of them as I could without doing, so it couldn't be coercive. The people had to come up with their own resolutions, but, the docket was really crazy. And what happened was, interestingly, I loved it. I felt like it was just what I was meant to do. I was very skilled at helping really complicated cases be broken down into the most simple components. And I helped people really move forward. And now the way I've translated that into my work is I offer online mediation at an affordable flat rate anywhere in the world. And although I can't do a separation agreement for everybody, I can do like a memorandum of understanding. So we come up with all of the key components that you need, and we can alleviate so much aggravation that's just not necessary, and that's caused by the process. So it's not like I said to myself, oh, I'm going to become a divorce lawyer. I love divorce, or anything like that. That was not the case. I do feel like I was definitely frustrated by the narrative, the global narrative of the broken home, the shame, all the negativity. I didn't like the fact that my childhood was sort of clouded by being the kid from the broken home. That really bugged me. But it's not like I set out to be a divorce lawyer. I think that I understand that relationships are difficult, but I also understand that when we own our part of the process, we can leave the relationship and move forward with a lot more power. And my mother was an amazing example of that in many ways. She and my father had some complicated personal issues between them. And whenever I would try to engage with her and ask, what happened, she would say, which was the biggest gift of ever, Dad and I was 9, Dad and I have grown up problems, and you're a child. And, you need to enjoy your childhood, and you don't need to worry about this. These are not kid problems, and, it's not your business, and you don't need to know about it. And, she could have said a lot of pretty bad things about my dad, which would have been true. And it probably would have been to my developmental detriment on a global perspective. So I'm very grateful for that. So did that answer your
That's
question?
co-parenting 101. Yeah, but it's co-parenting 101. I mean, you should
Well,
never, ever badmouth the other parent, but, there's no laws against it in people's households.
it's also, there's a lot of casual insulting that happens that we don't realize, and it's very hard to catch yourself. And I mean, the fact of the matter is we are human, and there is a disinclination to edit every one of our thoughts when we are around people that are our trusted few. And so, especially now during a period where we're in quarantine and you may have the kids most of the time, and you may be experiencing frustration with your ex, you might be talking to your friends in a unfavorable way about your ex, or you might just vent a little bit, and it's in the earshot of your kids, right? And so I'm just saying, if you find yourself doing it, just notice that you're doing it and try to replace that with something that's more positive. And that's all part of the method. But basically, you're right. It should be 101, but it's just very difficult for most people to just knock it off immediately. It just is.
Well, two things come to mind, Gabrielle, and that is yesterday I was speaking to my grandmother because I'm I love my grandmother to death. So this these lockdowns and how to you have to be home alone as a in my grandmother's situation. So I'm constantly checking on her.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking yesterday, and she was asking things about my former spouse, and I didn't want to really talk about it, and unfortunately, I had her at that moment. I had her on speakerphone, and it was right around the time yesterday where my son was packing up his stuff. Our home office is right across from his room, and I know he was in earshot, and I really didn't want to talk about my former wife, especially to my grandmother, especially in front of my son. And so I'm just saying to her, can we just change the subject? Can we just move on, talk about something else? Well, I just want to, no, please, let's just move on. But the other thing that you're bringing up, because again, we are, I know you want to talk about the
I,
uh,
I don't.
coronavirus,
If people,
but
if you don't think that people want to hear about it, I just know that there's a lot of issues. People are
no, 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 no. I just want to say, because yesterday I hopped on Instagram Live to talk about what you uh, part of the things. Hopefully, we'll get to is so I hopped on Instagram Live to talk about co-parenting in the coronavirus. And one of the things I had just read yesterday online was there's a newspaper called the South African, which is obviously a South African newspaper.
Mhm.
And their media specialist, medical specialist was saying that um, when it came to the co-parenting, that right now they're going to a 21-day lockdown, no questions asked. You are locked down. So whichever parent has that child right now, that's who that child is staying with. So this is different times, different um, methods of co-parenting when it comes to what's going on in our world right now.
Exactly. And it's very complicated because maybe they were spending time with a parent who really can't handle the kids for an extended period. Maybe, I mean, in the best of circumstances, hopefully you'll be able to, the other parent can make up the time later on. If they can't make up the time, we should just be grateful that we are all healthy. But it's very hard for a lot of parents. I mean, maybe you're the dad who just moved out, you're just getting your apartment set up. And of course, you're feeling out of sorts. Maybe you're really missing your kids, and to then just be told you can't have access to your kids for an extended period is incredibly heartbreaking. And that could be for a mom too. I don't mean to say that in a gendered way, but yeah, it's very complicated. But I didn't mean to segue you into coronavirus. If there was a follow up you had for what we were talking about before, I'm very happy to answer it.
No, I thought it was a good segue.
Yeah. So another thing that's happening right now are there's people who are just starting, they're just commencing the divorce action. And now, maybe one was planning to move out, and now maybe somebody's not working and there's not the normal resources that there would be, or nobody's really looking at houses in some areas. And so basically you're sort of stuck together, even though you'd be better apart, right? And so what do you do? So what I encourage you to do is to create literally a blueprint for success. Sit down. If you cannot do it by yourselves, do it with an online mediator. I'm happy to help, and maybe there's somebody right in your community about who can help, who can just help you create a temporary stopgap plan to get you through this time. None of us know how long it's going to last. It's probably going to be longer than we think and not as long as we fear. But one thing that could be very helpful is to create literally a co-parenting schedule that you put into effect immediately, even though you're both in the house. So what does that look like? That may mean that on your days, you put the kids to bed, you give them dinner, you do the major responsibilities. And if it's okay, you can allow the other parent to sit with you maybe while you're eating dinner. So it's a calm environment for the kids. but you take on the work as though you were still, as though you were in two separate households. There's a lot of different things that you can actually sit down and start fleshing out now. People are finding themselves trapped. And so this is a great time to either, number one, see if there's conversations you can have. Not everybody needs to separate, even though this is about blended families. If there's anyone listening who is sort of on the fence, now you have the undivided attention, like it or not, of your right, of your other spouse. And or two, you can start having those conversations about how you're going to make things work in a way that works for your family and a way that works for you. Because even if you don't have children, when you look back on your life, you don't want to feel, well, ask yourself if you want to feel that everything up to now was a mistake or a lie or somehow laden with something negative. You don't. We want to feel positive about our lives. And so how do we do that? We do that by changing our internal narrative and changing our response to all the external things that happen. And through patience, respect, peace, clarity, and forgiveness, which are the 5 essential teachings of the Better Apart method, we can really do that. But it's a day-by-day process. It's a moment-by-moment process. The best advice I could say is to create, everyone in the family should have their own safe space. Even if you have a tiny little apartment, everybody get a corner of a room that's just yours and agree with one another that you're going to respect each other's safe spaces so that you can take time and take space for yourself.
I'm thinking about when I was going through my separation into divorce, and it was very similar to what you were just describing, that we were still under the same roof, but essentially living separate lives. It was just getting to the point where I had to figure out where I was going to move to. Where am I going to put my stuff? All those kinds of things. But going back to one of your points I really enjoyed was, if you're in that situation where you're both under the same roof and you're possibly going through the divorce process, but neither of you can move, but having one of the spouses, soon to be former, put the kids to bed, have dinner with them. I wish I had really thought about that back then, instead of just living in my own misery.
Yeah, I mean, by creating a blueprint for success, nobody feels victimized as much. Obviously, if you're two different spaces emotionally, the person who is being left will tend to feel hurt through this process. That's just the way it is. It's very normal for both people to be on different points of processing emotionally, and that's okay. That's normal. Do your best to be compassionate and kind and give space, but at the same time, setting up a schedule both for processing. It may be that you live in a small apartment. A lot of people in cities are finding themselves in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and maybe the person who's more upset just needs time by themselves, to cry, to yell, to write, to do whatever they need to do. You can literally make a time schedule where each of you has a designated space of the day where the bedroom is just yours. So you get time alone and you each respect it. And similarly to where you have a case where somebody doesn't want to have, where somebody is resisting creating a parenting plan, once you have a plan in place, you'll find a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the upset, a lot of the feeling badgered sort of dissipates and settles, and things fall into their place better. It's the clarity that is so helpful in moving forward. So if you can create an overall construct, a container to hold your family through this period of time, while there is actually no access to justice. It's normally you wouldn't have to talk to each other under normal circumstances. This is what I mean about talking about coronavirus. Like, you'd go to your lawyer, the lawyer would serve the other lawyer. If you say, I don't want to talk to her anymore, I don't want to talk to him anymore, the heck with that. I'm just going to court. You can't do that now, right? And you can't kill each other. So what are you going to do, right?
Well, let's hope they don't.
Right, exactly. But so now you need to find a way to move forward that's safe. And if you can't sit together and talk, maybe you can communicate via email. Maybe you can use, as you and I were talking about before, a co-parenting app such as the FAIR, FAYR, Be Fair co-parenting app, where you can, even if you're in the same house, you can communicate back and forth with each other in a safe space so things don't escalate. It's difficult, and I don't mean to suggest that you might be able to sit at the table and make an agreement for all things, but you'd be surprised. A lot more collaboration is starting to happen right now because there's no choices, there's no options. You just have to notice the neutral and move forward from there.
You know, I'm thinking about worst case scenario if my former spouse and I were under these circumstances. It would have been a living hell. It really would be. I mean, there would be, and I just want to say there would be no violence. It would just be a lot of anger, and I would, just picturing in my head, Gabrielle, I just would feel even worse for our son being stuck in that situation. So very grateful that the coronavirus had not happened back in 2008.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who are not, they're not out of the weeds and they are living together. And so figuring out how to handle that's really important. Now, if you're living in a violent situation, there are still resources. It's much harder because a lot of the group kind of shelter places are being disbanded because they don't want coronavirus to spread. You may need to reach out to a friend or a family and then have your safe space be with them, and do your best to keep yourself and your child out of harm's way. And that's a real ongoing issue in this present moment as well. But circling back to the idea of neutrality, one way to diffuse a lot of unnecessary arguments is by recognizing all that's neutral. So if somebody cleans the dishes after they eat, you can just say, thanks for putting the dishes away. Some small, simple recognition that there's something that's not bad, that's going to be helpful, and it's going to pave the way for that other person to start hearing you say positive things. Just get in the habit of setting a neutral environment, and then you can go forward from there, because you really want to keep the negativity down and keep the blow-ups, the flare-ups from happening. And the best way to do that is by taking a gigantic step back and noticing what your triggers are and staying away from circumstances that are going to both trigger you and your spouse, your soon-to-be ex-spouse.
So many things are popping in my head, and again, staying on this topic of, in the situation where you do have, a couple who are possibly going through the divorce process, but especially where, the East Coast where you're at, where, they have to be inside together and trying to survive together and trying to parent together. And then also about, I know we're talking earlier about, your online course. And I just started thinking, well, what if, your course would be something for the two parents to sit down and take? Would that work?
I can't.
Or am I totally off the path?
I can't hear you. You just cut out for a second. You just said the online course.
So what I was saying is, if you have, so with your online course, Gabrielle, would it benefit a couple who possibly are going through divorce or possibly being quarantined together right now? Would it be in their best interest to sit and take your online course?
Absolutely. And if there are couples who are interested, although you do sign a waiver saying that it's for one person, if you send me a private email and say, under these circumstances, we would like to do it together. We're living together. I'll write you an email, which will give you approval to do it together. And we can talk about follow-ups and that sort of thing. But you can find the course at GabrielleHartley.com under group courses or group coaching up on the menu bar. And then there's also like a little message me that you can send me a message. But by doing the course together or doing it on your own, you're going to get a lot of tips on how to navigate forward. And then if you have the instinct that you have personal questions, I'm not going to answer a highly personal question in a group context, but if you can phrase it in a general way, I'm going to keep time at the end so that people can ask their questions. And I'm also, for as long as I can, I'm going to keep the course small. I'm going to limit the number of people so that everybody has a chance to ask their questions and there's time to answer. So the answer is yes, and definitely reach out because there are tools that you can use. A lot of the tools are internal tools, but they are fun. You can do them even with your kids. It's just all about getting out of the blame, getting into the visionary, and then drilling down on what does that mean for our family as it's reconfigured into this divorced, separated context. Because you're not going to be living together forever. This is going to end. It might not end, like I said before, as quickly as we want, but it is not going to be going on forever. And our level of self-respect can really start plummeting when we're living in these adverse conditions for too long. Excuse me.
So what can you give us an example or two of these fun exercises?
Okay, well, fun depends on your definition of fun. But an exercise that I think is really fun is to sit down either with a pen and paper, like get a journal if you don't have one in the house, order one online, and drill down into your deepest vision of what you're looking forward to in any context of your life, what you'd like to see happen. There's something called the VER protocol, which is visualize, internalize, and realize. So what that means is like we get stuck in the blame game, right? Like this wouldn't happen if he/she would just stop doing such and such, right? But the reality of it is they may never stop doing whatever annoying thing you're talking about. It's just about like how you're going to move yourself forward, right? And so we might have to talk about how we're moving ourselves forward today. And it might be more about the long game. What do we want to effectuate in our own lives 6 months from now, a year from now? And start really dreaming big. Write it down. Get into all the weeds. And I have a great exercise that I'm happy to send to anyone who takes my course, all about creating the greatest clarity in their lives for themselves. And that's called the Clarity Cruise. And if writing is not your jam, you could do the same thing in the form of a vision board. Just take old magazines, newspapers, pictures, and a piece of paper or an oak tag, if you still have that sort of thing in your house, and create something that's visually exciting and stimulating for you that makes you feel empowered. In terms of building self-esteem and self-respect while you're feeling bad, something that is really healing, again, I don't know that this comes into fun, but it's really healing, is to do what my grandfather used to always say, which is never throw anyone away, put them on a shelf. Give yourself more of the people and circumstances and during these times, books and movies that make you feel good, and protect yourself from too much exposure from the things that make you feel bad, that bring you down. That whole idea of accentuating the positive. It doesn't mean that your friend who keeps saying, well, I never liked him anyway, or she was never as good anyway. People who start to make you feel bad, or why couldn't you work it out? Your mom might say, right? Like, it doesn't mean you have to cut those relationships off, but what it may mean is to spend less time with them for a period of time while you're going through this process or this hard time, and spending more time with people, things. Right now is a great time to listen to so many amazing podcasts, right? Listen to podcasts, listen to music, clean out those closets that you never got to. Do things that are going to make you feel better, bring you more clarity, bring you more joy. And in doing that, by creating that as a practice, doing this regularly over time, while you're feeling okay, when you're not feeling okay during those harder moments, you're going to be able to feel okay because you have the memory of doing something that feels good already infused into your essence.
What's an oak tag?
I know, as I said them, I was like, that's such old words. Like a big piece of hard paper that you would use for like a science project. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like a piece,
No.
like when you were a kid, didn't you have a piece of almost like a cardboard that might be brightly colored that you'd go to the drugstore to get, and you would, write clouds and have 3 columns to write, like cumulus, nebulous. Do you not know what I'm talking about? Now they do trifolds a lot.
No. Apparently, the education in the burbs of Chicago is totally different. We weren't exposed to oak tags.
Well, it's just a big piece of paper. That's all I meant. Oak tag is like a big piece of hard paper that you can hang up and look at. And so on it, you're going to put all positives. You're not going to put a picture of like a dartboard with your spouse's face in the middle of it, right?
Oh, so I should take mine down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's not good for your kids to see either, Tommy. Hello, right?
It's in a closet.
Exactly. So another really easy thing you can do that makes responding rather than reacting more accessible is just breathing. Just sit down and take 3 breaths in through your nose for a count of 3 to 5, hold it at the top, and then out through your nose again for a count of 3 to 5. And you just do that, and it literally calms your whole system down. And as you can tell, like, I'm a pretty high energy person, so I can be reactive. I can get activated fairly quickly. And I know this about myself. So when I'm feeling agitated, first I do a Seinfeldian yell in my head saying, "Serenity now." And
Serenity now, yep.
Serenity now. And then I breathe. And then I feel a little less crazy. And then I can respond in a way that makes sense. I just want to put out there, I also do have an online canned program where it's not a live program. It's six modules. It's a 6-week program that is 13 modules, and you can do that at your own time. And what's nice about that is that comes with a one-on-one session with me. And you can do that also with your spouse. So I'm just putting that out there. Just look at the page for coaching and see what works for you if you are interested in learning any of these skills or trying to figure out how the heck you can get through strategizing, getting through your life right now during this complicated time. Because there are just so many different fact patterns. I cannot possibly make them all up or address them all now. Your life is yours alone, but the themes run through. And so just if you take nothing else away from this podcast, please take through the idea of creating a container for your family to function, creating a blueprint. And if you can't get your co-parent to engage, please get yourself a copy of Better Apart, or please do one of my programs and get some skills for yourself. Really easy, simple, actionable skills that will get you through. I don't know if I told you this, Tommy, but People magazine called the program and the book The Conscious Uncoupling How To, and Gwyneth Paltrow endorsed it. And it's gotten a lot of really positive feedback across different media channels, which I'm extraordinarily thrilled and excited and proud of. So,
where do I go first? But with Gwyneth Paltrow and that whole uncoupling, it seemed that when she announced
the conscious
that, pardon?
when she announced that they had a conscious uncoupling.
Yeah, I think a lot. I'll say it a lot. Me, what are you speaking? What are you talking about? Uncoupling. You're getting divorced. You just put a different word in there.
Right. That is, I'm so glad you just said that, because the one thing I have not talked about in my process with you just now is the power of words and mantras. And I don't like to use the word mantra or affirmation. I just say, positive statements about yourself and about your life. Words have so much power, right? Like, so we don't want to wear a necklace that says trouble. We want to wear a necklace that says love. We don't want to, when we make an affirmation, when we do our journaling, when we make our vision board, we want to use positive, present, specific terms that are going to move our internal energy in a forward way that serves us. Because living in the blame, living in the victimization, living in with the stigma of the divorce is not going to serve you in your life to feel good during the years and days that we have here together or apart on this planet. So when she used those words, yes, it did definitely give a set of people an eye roll. But I think that if you go a little further, you'll notice that those words are positive and powerful and pressed reset in a global way that is just, I'm personally forever grateful to Gwyneth Paltrow, as controversial as she may be in many ways, for powerfully resetting the messaging. We can really start to move forward. And now, taking it one step further, I thought what you were going to say is, well, that's nice for Gwyneth and Chris Martin because, you know, they get along well and they both wanted to have this conscious uncoupling. What about the couples where it's only one person who's doing the hard work and the other couple, you know, is just creating more chaos? That's actually who I originally created the Better Part program for. It's where the other person is not being cooperative. Like, what the heck do? You can't change them, right? All you can do is go through your grieving process, go through the hard parts, and at the same time, build upon yourself by forming habits that are more positive as you move forward and rebuild your life apart, recognizing that so long as you have kids, even if your kids, when your kids are grown and flown, they're still in your lives. You're going to have grandchildren, you're going to have holidays. And if you can figure out a way to navigate yourself in a way that is peaceful and calm and responsive and, again, elegant. So you're making your dynamics simple. Every time I say the word elegant, I mean clear simplicity. You can feel better, feel more engaged, and live in a more wholehearted way.
I'm a huge fan of Coldplay and Chris Martin, so I mean, I look up to Chris Martin, and I don't know, I really wanted him to come out in the media and go and just say, quite honestly, what is she talking about? But you know, I think it's a situation where, like you were talking about, is that it worked for them. I mean, they have that type of personality for the whole, like you were saying, changing the words, changing the phrasing of divorce and separating. And I think it worked for them, but I think a lot of people, you know, it's like when I tell people, oh, this is my bonus daughter, and they give me, what are you talking about? It's again, it's changing the vernacular.
Exactly. It's so amazing that, like, I mean, if people want to feel angry, that's their prerogative. But I would challenge you to ask how that anger is serving you. Anger is very protective in nature, and we all need it to begin with when we're feeling hurt. But over time, our need for anger dissipates. We're just in the habit of being angry. So we want to be aware. We want to notice how we're feeling and notice when we feel strong enough to start letting that go. When do we feel ready to actually move on in a powerful, positive way? And maybe you don't want to feel powerful or positive. Maybe you want to feel weak and angry, and that's fine. But I'm here and you're here to help people to see that there is a better way.
I appreciate that, Gabrielle, and again, it goes with you as well. I know watching you on Instagram, you're very passionate about trying to help others. And one of the things that came to mind was, so here we are, we have this coronavirus going on. And one of the things that's been talked about is what's going to happen come January of 2021. There's going to be possibly a lot of babies, but at the same time, there could be possibly a lot of divorces. How do you feel about that being put in the media, that people are already looking at January 2021 as going to be a heavy time for divorces when, people can't even predict where the coronavirus is going to take us.
So, I mean, to be honest, I'm pleased when there's any media not just talking about the numbers of illnesses and deaths. It's a nice break to hear just, some sociological predictions. We don't know what's going to happen. It is true that during blackouts, during times where there are disruptions in our normal life, there are more babies. It is also true that right now, while people are being forced together, a lot of difficult conversations are probably happening right now as we speak. People who are having affairs are finding those affairs abruptly ended, or they find that they need to tell their spouse, although I would caution you not to tell your spouse while you're living in the house together with your children. There's a lot of mess happening right now. The disruption in our normal life is radically going to have an impact that is going to trickle down. And those two topics that you raised, having babies and getting divorced, are two that are foreseeable, but I am sure there are very many others that are not foreseeable. I read a wonderful article yesterday that I reposted on LinkedIn that was talking about how this family, this mother was reconnecting in her mind about her grandma's life in Appalachia, right? Like suddenly she found herself at home with her kids, unplugged. The kids didn't know what to do. There was no clear path in sight to rejoining their busy, active lives as they knew it. And, what does it mean right now to slow down? We're all having to slow down, and it's really fascinating. And I, for one, feel like rebooting is not a bad thing. Of course, I'm concerned about all of our health and wellness and the economy and the global economy. But when we if we don't catastrophize and we don't minimize and we just sort of hang in the middle, I think a lot of changes are going to shake down, and all of them are not going to be negative.
I agree. And, each day is different, but each day brings, new light of positive stories that are happening out there to, do what others can to help our health workers on the front line. I really do feel that, and not to be Pollyanna, but I want more positive stories out there. I want people to realize and understand that this is a temporary situation. Let's, as the cliche already is happening, is let's do this together. Let's work together. Let's, be a part of this together so we don't continue moving in the direction that this virus has impacted other countries.
That's right. But I think what happens is there's so, and I'm so glad you raised this, because this goes also to our the conflict and negativity in our houses and between our houses. And what that is there's so much anxiety. And what anxiety causes is reactivity. It also causes denial. People who are so scared, there's all these memes about how like the boomer generation is difficult to control. They're partying, they're going out just like nothing is wrong. They're in denial. And I think that there's a large number of people, and teenagers too, but that's a different story. It's not that they are in denial because they're being ignorant. It's because their fear and anxiety is so high that it's easier and safer to pretend it's not happening. And similarly, if you find yourself fighting with your ex or your soon-to-be ex, remember that everyone is anxious. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So if you have an ex who's saying, you can't have the kids back because you took them to Target and now they've been exposed and we've been, and I can't trust you to take them again because I don't know what you're going to do. You're not taking the quarantine seriously. Remember, they're not being mean and controlling. They're afraid, right? we just need to remember that we're all in this together. We're all just doing the best that we can, assume best intentions. I know that that's very unnatural for a lot of people, but I'm very lucky that that's just the way I'm wired. And I encourage any of you that if you have the ability to assume that everybody's doing the best they can, it's going to go a long way in building your forgiveness muscle, building your compassion muscle. And the most important thing is that then you are going to have an experience of emotional freedom. Circling back to that, we all want to feel, if not happy, at least content. And when we're emotionally free, we can feel content. So if we're on top of each other right now in small living spaces, we're all going to feel better if we can each create a safe space, whether it's a corner of a room or taking turns being alone in a room. There's a lot of people living in very tight quarters, and we need to harken back and think about how our ancestors all lived and how did they survive. And the way they did it is by everyone stayed in their lane. Everyone had their job to do. Create routines within your household and do your very best not to think of this as a catastrophe that is unending, but think of it in terms of chunks of time. How am I going to get through this next hour, this day, this week? Don't project beyond 2 weeks because it's too much for so many people. If it's too much for you, that's absolutely fine.
I do want to respect your time, Gabrielle, but I also want to make sure we mention your wonderful book, Better Apart. You also have, as you've mentioned, you've got some wonderful online courses to help others that are struggling with the world of divorce and I apologize, uncoupling.
No, you can still say divorce. That's fine. But the other thing is, so I'm also here to do online mediation for anybody who is looking for it during this period of time. I am offering some special rates for people because I just know how tough it is, and I'm trying to do the best to do my part to accommodate other people to get through, create agreements, even if it's just a stopgap to get through this period of time while there is no access to justice.
It's rough out there when it comes to, especially if you're in a situation where you just want to get divorced, you just want to move on with your life, but unfortunately, like you were just saying, courthouses are closed. You're going to have to wait for your so-called freedom.
But you can still get that separation agreement done. So that's the good news. You're not as stuck as you think. If you can come to the table in a meaningful way, if you have a good mediator, they can really modulate the way the process goes. I do this with lots and lots of couples. I set a timer. We take turns talking. We're respectful. Even if your dynamic is not normally respectful, you'd be surprised how much you can get done if you have somebody holding your hand through the process in a clear and meaningful way. But if you don't need that and you just need a little support, the Better Apart book or course can really help you. I'm just so grateful when I get letters from people all over the world thanking me. And that is like the most rewarding part of this whole process because, when you do this kind of work, it's in a vacuum. You don't really see if people are reading the book. You see how many people buy it, but you don't know if they're reading it and you don't know if they like it, or if it's helping them. And when I get letters from people, it is just like the most touching and it makes me feel like I'm really making a difference. And that's amazing. It's so much more rewarding than going into court and fighting with people for what? Right?
Well, I know I really wish, I mean, I know we both wish we had more time, but my understanding is your kids need your computer for school.
They do need my computer now. I ordered a computer and it will be here by the end of the week, hopefully. But yeah, 3 kids and, 2 adults and 4 computers. So, yep. So I need to let my 8-year-old sign into his class.
I'm anxiously waiting to hear from my son today because, like we were talking earlier, both my son and daughter are starting their online learning today, and I'm like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun.
Well, I have some friends whose kids have been doing it for a number of weeks, and once the schools work out the kinks, it can actually be excellent. I have friends whose kids have had really favorable experiences, so I'm hopeful.
I have a dear friend of mine whose son has been doing online school for numerous years, and he loves it. So we'll see. I mean, it's as we've already discussed, it's a new world.
That's right. It's going to be a learning curve for the teachers and the administrators. And if you live somewhere where they're starting to do it, that's wonderful. They're just starting to do some kind of online learning here in Massachusetts, and I couldn't be more grateful, because I think that the sooner we get normalcy in place, the better off everybody will be. And, there's a lot of concern about the IEPs and the 504s being met, and those can all be met as well. It takes a little bit more planning, but there are Zoom rooms and all kinds of assets out there so that your kids can get all of their special needs met also online. It's just going to be a little bit of a learning curve, I think, to get everything up and running. But
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Always, Gabrielle. You always have an open invite.
Thank you so much.
Hey, enjoy your day and good luck with the kids.
Thank you, and likewise to you. Okay, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Gabrielle.
Bye.
Wait, please leave a rating and review. Whether it's good, bad, in between, this guy's got to know. Yes, he's not the best looking guy in the world, but man, is he sweet. He's got soft skin. He's nice to snuggle with. Oh, wait, I didn't say that, did I?